Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, well, it's time to restart the podcast. We go on hiatus over the summer while school is out, but now a new school year has begun, and so it's time to interview more San Diego State alums and learn about what it was like for them as students and what they are doing with their life. And as we begin a new academic year, it's also time for a changing of the guard of the podcast. My name is Josh Suchon. I created this podcast. I have been the host. But after 75 episodes, it's time to hand over the microphone to someone else. I mean, eventually they kick you out of college. You can't be on the 11-year plan. You're supposed to finish in 4 years. And it is my pleasure to introduce the new host of the Where You At podcast, Rami Alarian.
Josh, I could not thank you enough. Thank you for this passing of the torch, and I will say I don't want you to leave just yet because I want you to be my first guest.
Well, okay, I'm already here and already started the episode. I might as well.
I'm glad I didn't have to twist your arm for that one. Thank you for being on one last time. We have Josh Suchon, a testament to the exciting corners that journalism might take you. What have you done? You said you're a jack of all trades, master of a lot, clearly. Sports announcer, author, voice actor. You're the former host of this podcast, this very podcast we're on. Josh, do what you do best and give us the play-by-play. How do you feel? Is it surreal passing this creation on?
Yes and no. I knew that this was going to be not going to be something that I continued forever. I wanted to get it going and then hand it off to others who can continue to take the reins with it. So it was time, and I'm grateful that Temple gave it the yes immediately and that we were able to do 75 episodes. And now it's time for you, Rami, to kind of take it in different directions. I think you need to constantly think of new ideas and different guests and different perspectives. And so that's the whole point of college. That's the whole point of this podcast. And so I'm thrilled for you, and will be ready to do whatever I can to help you be successful with this podcast.
Of course. And for listeners, what was the history behind Where You At? Is it because you care about SDSU? Is it because you're thankful? Is it because you want to give that back? Because it's truly awe-inspiring, I would seriously be proud.
Well, so the gist of it is when Temple first started, when he took over as the director of JMS, I think it was sometime in 2020. It was during COVID. I remember he sent an email off to basically like a huge group of whoever was in this email database that he had inherited. And he introduced himself, and he said that if you want to get involved in the university, just write me back and say, I'm in. And I did that. Because I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, there wasn't a whole lot that I could immediately do. But I kept just thinking of ways that I could give back to the university. And I thought about like what my skills are, like how I could do it from afar. And, one of the things that I guess you would call it a criticism is that I didn't always think that San Diego State was the best at promoting its alums and basically bragging about them. And I'm super proud of attending San Diego State. All of my closest friends are Aztecs. I knew what they have done with their lives. And I thought that the podcast would be an interesting way to showcase what people have done. I call it the Syracuse Mafia or the Northwestern Mafia, the Arizona State Mafia. There's all these schools that are known for journalism. And I just thought, San Diego State may not be on the tip of people's tongues, but I know how many amazing journalists and PR people and authors and movie writers have come from San Diego State. And so I wanted to tell those stories, and that's what we've done so far.
Amazing. You saw value. You saw missed potential almost, and you're kind of shining a good spotlight on it. And I couldn't agree more. I think we have some fantastic, really wonderful journalism folks here at SDSU, even spanning on a great deal of good communication folks as well. Something that we should most definitely be proud of, especially looking into what alumni you have personally kind of talked to. it kind of shows that the diversity is apparent and their talents are immeasurable.
Yeah, I always thought that San Diego is just like this really interesting location too, because it's this huge city. It's one of the biggest cities in the country. But you really are blocked, right? You're blocked by an ocean, you're blocked by a desert, you're blocked by another country, and you're blocked by this behemoth that is the #2 media market in Los Angeles. And yet San Diego still is just this great, vibrant community. And so a lot of times what San Diego State alums have to do is leave San Diego because there's not an enormous number of jobs, right? There's only been one newspaper in town for a long time. And even from a sports perspective, there has not been a basketball team since the 80s. The Chargers left. So now you have the Padres and soccer and San Diego State and USD and UC San Diego sports, but you don't have an enormous number of sports opportunities, which is why I ultimately left. I wonder all the time, what in the world was I thinking? Why did I leave America's finest city? What's it going to take for me to move back to San Diego? But that's the reality, is that there may not be an enormous number of jobs. There's some, but a lot of the alums like myself have had to leave and leave their mark somewhere else in another city and another state. And that's why you may not necessarily know about all of these alums, because they're not around San Diego constantly, but we are everywhere around the country. And that's what led to the name, Where You At? Because we wanted to know just that, where you at, SDSU alums? And that is what we try to do with the podcast.
It's nice reaching out to these different corners and yeah, as San Diego feels almost like a little bubble, even though all these neighborhoods are so diverse, they all feel so different, kind of like their own little cities. The job market on journalism is scarce. It's rare. So you're absolutely right. And people do often branch out even to just NorCal or even just a hike up to LA. You're absolutely right. And I've seen that time and time again. So I completely understand why you want to highlight that, hey, people came from here. This is where they came from. This is where it started. At SDSU, this is who they were. And so I guess that leads me into my next question. I'm hoping you can tell me about your time at SDSU.
Sure. So I was like a lot of kids from Northern California who wanted to get away from home, but did not want to live in LA, did not want anything part of LA. And so San Diego is this perfect place. It was the furthest location away from home that was still in-state tuition. It was warm. There was beaches. I had sports teams that I cared about. And so San Diego State was perfect for me. And I found a home in the Daily Aztec. And I was on the 5-year plan. Back then, it was extremely difficult to graduate in 4 years. I was on the 5-year plan. I started as a baseball beat writer at the Daily Aztec. I ended up as the editor-in-chief. That was the 95-96 school year. I also spent a year over at KCR. I broadcasted baseball, basketball, football games live, put them onto a cassette tape, and went back to the studio and put the cassette tape in and pressed play and then pressed pause and pressed public service announcements for my commercials. And so, yeah, I got a lot of experience on campus with the newspaper, with the radio station, with friends, with professors, and then realized, okay, I need to eventually leave, get out of here. A lot of my friends were on the 6-year plan. I thought about staying for a 6th year, but I realized it was time to get out there. I'm one of the very lucky ones who always knew that I wanted to do something involving sports journalism. I didn't know for sure exactly what that path would be. And so I wanted to do as many things as possible. I wanted to write. I wanted to take photos. I wanted to do play-by-play. I wanted to get in front of a camera. I wanted to be behind the camera. I remember just thinking that if I can learn all of these skills, it'll make it easier for me to eventually find any job. But what I really always wanted to do, Rami, was to do play-by-play. And my favorite sport was baseball. And it took me a long time before I was able to get the job that I ultimately wanted. I did a lot of zigging and zagging, literally across the country, and also changing careers and all that. But ultimately, the foundation of what I do, describing a baseball game live on the radio and on television, comes back to journalism principles that I learned at San Diego State.
Wonderful. And as also a NorCal escapee, and I can relate to you that it was the exact same story. Reaching for that in-state tuition while still trying to go as far down as possible is something I can relate too much to. So I kind of got a good understanding of maybe why you chose SDSU, but I'm kind of curious. Did you always know that you wanted to go through sports journalism? You said that in college you knew, but is it something that got heightened in college, kind of looking towards radio, looking towards sports journalism, maybe even being part of the Daily Aztec?
For pretty much as long as I can remember, I had a really strong feeling that this is what I wanted to do, or this is what I would ultimately do. I played a lot of sports as a kid, and I don't know about you, Rami, but when my parents or my relatives, they would say, "Hey, what are you going to be when you grow up?" And I would say, "I'm going to be a professional baseball player." And then they would gently say, like, "Well, what's your backup plan, just in case?" And then, so I was painfully shy as a kid. My sister, I have an older sister, she did all the talking for both of us. But the only topic that people could get me to talk about was sports, especially baseball. And then I wouldn't shut up. And so then relatives basically planted the seed. Well, maybe you can be one of those sportscasters. And so that's where the fuse was first lit. And then was very fortunate that I had parents who, we had two newspapers, sometimes three newspapers that were delivered to our house. My dad was someone who always watched the local news before going to bed. I was given subscriptions to Sports Illustrated and the Sporting News and Beckett Baseball Monthly and Baseball Digest. I was given books at Christmas time. It was not Choose Your Own Adventure. It was not Curious George. It was not Nancy Drew. I was given baseball books. So I was a vociferous reader of all things. I occasionally read sections other than the sports section as well in the newspaper. I would at least glance at the headlines. And then when I got to high school, it was only fitting that I would write for my high school newspaper. So all 4 years that I was at Foothill High, shout out in Pleasanton, I was on the high school newspaper in flight. And I went from a writer to the sports editor and ultimately became the editor-in-chief of the high school newspaper as well. And so by the time that I got to San Diego State, there was no doubts whatsoever. I absolutely positively knew that it was going to be journalism. It was going to be the Daily Aztec. I eventually wanted to transition to broadcast, and I didn't know exactly how to do that, but I thought that I could maybe figure it out at some point.
You think SDSU kind of made you better in a way? It kind of put you on a better through path somehow? Was all those opportunities good for you?
Yeah, absolutely. My professors were excellent. The three that come to mind is Professor Wolfmeyer, Tim Wolfmeyer, James Buckaloo, and Joseph Spivak. Those were the three that I had the most, and those three were huge. Most of the others, I really can't remember. They kind of came and went. But then I also just happened to be surrounded by a lot of other students who really cared and taught me. People like Eric Winter and Tim Meehan and Eric Breyer. They came before me, Neil Hendricks, and I learned just as much in the Daily Aztec newsroom, if not more, than from them. And then I felt like it was my obligation to pass that along to people who came after me. There was a guy named Matt Linville, who's a dear friend of mine to this day. And it felt like every other semester, one of us would be in charge of overseeing the other person, right? Like I would be the assistant sports editor, and then he would be a writer, and then he was the managing editor, and I was the sports editor, and then I was the editor in chief, and he was my managing editor. And so it was just those bonds with those classmates where you really you grow from each other. We just constantly learn from each other. I feel so fortunate that I was just around other people who cared, and we lived in the Daily Aztec. We went in there just to hang out. We didn't have cell phones to call each other and text each other. We just went in there to find out what was going on, and we would spend hours and hours in there learning from each other, cracking dumb jokes, hopefully writing a bunch of really good journalistic stories, and just bonding. And then you had sporting events where back then, the glory days of campus newspapers, we had a huge budget, and at least one person went on every single football road trip, sometimes two or three or four. I remember we had a trip to Fresno, and 8 of us piled into 2 cars and went up there. And I think only 4 people actually did journalism. The other 4 just went to hang out. Campus newspaper went to the basketball tournament. We had a budget, and we went out and traveled, and we got to be shoulder to shoulder with the San Diego Union Tribune and the LA Times and the Associated Press and other TV stations, and we got to see what they did. We got to compare ourselves. We took pride in the fact that our stories could be, and sometimes were just as good, that we broke stories, and they had to follow the stories that we got. And so that's what San Diego State did for me. Is I didn't feel like a student journalist. I felt like a journalist who just happened to go to class.
Talk about the glory days of journalism. That sounds too good to be true. That's amazing. I'd want to road trip myself. That sounds awesome. And it's nice that you kind of always knew that that hint of what your career is now was always kind of in you. Something that shined through, the thing that made you want to talk, that wanted to kind of blabber on about that. That feels nice. I could only imagine. And
Yeah, and I was going to say that it did not come naturally for me to speak for a living. I
mm,
talked super fast because I was self-conscious and basically wanted to finish the words so people would stop looking at me. And if I look back objectively at my time in college, I was not ready. I didn't have the voice. I looked young and I sounded really, really young and insecure when I spoke. And bottom line is I just wasn't ready to get in front of a microphone, get in front of a camera and do this. And it took me a long time before I got to that point. I'll never forget there was one time I was out at spring training with the Daily Aztec and I introduced myself to the late Jerry Coleman, longtime Padres announcer. And I remember telling him that what I do right now is I write for the Daily Aztec, but I want to talk. I want to do like you, but I don't know how to do this. And I'll never forget Jerry's words were, if you can write it, then you can say it. And he told me that every time that you're on a keyboard and you're typing words, you're getting better as a speaker. And that one day, the words that you type, you're going to be able to say those words. And he was absolutely right. And it took a long time, but I eventually got there. And now I'm doing what I ultimately hoped that I would do, which is broadcasting a baseball game live every night. And so it's, again, those foundations. I always think about that conversation with Jerry Coleman. The Daily Aztec sent me to spring training as a student to write some stories. And while I was there, I just introduced myself to as many people as I could. And that was life-changing advice from Jerry Coleman.
yeah, yeah. And I think it goes both ways. If you're fine with the speaking portion, I think you can put pen to paper, and it's kind of a two-way translation. I feel like speaking translates to writing, writing translates to speaking, and I mean, heck, that's journalism. That's journalism for you right there. That is amazing advice. I'm also kind of curious on when you think you kind of got your voice. Sounds like it didn't come just at the snap of a finger. It came over time. And did that come with things that happened after SDSU?
Yeah, so a couple of things kind of like pointed me back toward. So my first job out of San Diego State was actually with the minor league baseball team. It was with the Watertown Indians, upstate New York, about 20 minutes from the Canadian border. I went across the open air theater at graduation, got in my car the next day, drove across the country 3,000 miles for a summer job. It was only a summer job. And I got to broadcast some games, and that was what I wanted to do. Trying to find that second job was challenging, and I ended up working for the Oakland Tribune for 10 years. I covered high school sports for 3 years. I covered the Giants for 4 years, and I covered the A's for 3 years. And I wrote a book about Barry Bonds based on the 2001 season when he set the single season home run record. It was published by the sports editor who hired me at the Daily Aztec, Eric Winter, who to this day is one of my best friends. He's like the older brother I never had. I don't make a career choice without consulting with Eric. So it was very much a Daily Aztec production. And as I was doing interviews in order to promote the book, that's when I started to get more confident in speaking, to answer your question. I did a lot of interviews where I was on pregame shows, where I went on the set of TV shows, and I needed to learn how to speak confidently and look into the camera and give efficient answers that did not go for a long time. And because of those interviews went well enough that I then became a more regular guest on different shows. I remember ESPN had me on multiple times live from various different studios to talk baseball, to talk about the A's or the Giants. Same with pregame shows again. And again, there's like these little conversations that you never forget. There was a photographer. He still works. His name is Rusty. I can't ever remember his real name, but everyone called him Rusty. And he was one of the best shooters that exists in the Bay Area. And we finished the segment, and he brought me over, and I'll never forget. He said, "Josh, you as a guest are better than most of the hosts who I shoot. You should be doing this on a daily basis." And he just said it out of the blue. And that conversation gave me the confidence to decide that I want to try this again. I need to figure out what I can do to make this transition from print reporter to broadcaster. And that was one of the key moments. And there was a lot of things that needed to happen from that point on. But again, it was writing a book. It led to interviews. that led to more interviews. And then somebody out of the blue gave me a compliment that made me think, you know what? I need to try this.
I mean, some things never change with journalism, I feel like, and it's that it's a community thing. It's something that you kind of learn from others here and there, inspired by other journalists here, understanding a person's career there, getting advice here and there. I mean, some things never change when it comes to that. But it seems like you had a very lovely the support system with you. A lot of people that you could rely on. I mean, that's something that came from SDSU as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it becomes this combination where ultimately you have to believe in yourself and you
Yeah.
need to have just this burning desire that says, I'm going to try and I don't care if I fail. And even if I do fail, I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep trying. But it
Mhm.
absolutely helps when you have those people that instill that confidence in you by saying different words or who will help you, who will give you advice, who will go into the editing room with you and help put together a demo reel for you if you don't quite know how to edit things just yet. And that's where I also just think that it comes back to just being a good person. People help people who are good people. And so whenever people ask me about like I want to network with people and all that, and I'm like, okay, that's fine, but don't go to somebody thinking what can they do for me. Think about what can I do
Absolutely.
for them. Like,
Yeah.
you can be a mentor as much as you're a mentee. You can help other people as much as they help you. And I think the more that you give to the world, the journalism community specifically, the more that those people are going to want to give back to you.
I couldn't agree more. And what is this career of yours looked like since fresh out of SDSU?
It's all over the place.
As I've
Schizophrenic.
heard.
Yeah,
As I've
schizophrenic.
heard.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, I've been a newspaper reporter, I've been a pre and post game host, I've been a talk show host. I have written books, I've done play-by-play announcing in the minor leagues. I've done newspaper reporting in the major leagues. I've hosted a podcast, multiple podcasts. Yeah, I've done some voiceover work. I co-created a YouTube series that continues today about baseball play-by-play announcing. I missed writing, so I went back to writing on Substack, which I still do at least once a week, hopefully, unless I forget, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. So yeah, I mean, and I do think that all of those skills help. Before we recorded this podcast, I was researching something to write about from my Substack. And in the process of that, there are some interesting nuggets, and I will use those nuggets in my broadcast tonight, depending on what's happening in the game and just where the flow of the game goes. And if it doesn't happen today, then tomorrow or the day after, I will use some of those like nuggets. And so I think the research that I do as a writer helps me become a better broadcaster. And I'm a big believer that all of the different things, interviewing people on a podcast helps make me better from when I'm interviewing people for a pregame show or when I have a corporate guest who is the sponsor of the fireworks night and they really didn't give me any kind of interesting bullet points to talk about. And so I got to find a way to keep this conversation going and still describe the game at the same time. So I think that all of the different skills, they all work together. You put them in a blender and hopefully it creates a delicious smoothie.
Really good content. I mean, how does it feel kind of having a career centered around the voice? Your voice. What's different about writing compared to maybe a career where you talk into a microphone? Well, what's the understanding of that?
So when I was a newspaper reporter, Rami, people would ask me, like, who do you want to win? And they would say, like, oh, you must be the biggest Giants fan ever if you write about the Giants. And I would say, no, I'm not a Giants fan. I'm an objective reporter. I
Hmm.
root for this. Number one, I root for the story. But number two, I root for whoever has the lead after 6 innings. I do not want this game to change because I'm writing a story on deadline. And so if it's back and forth, that means I need to keep deleting my story and rewriting my story. And that's going to make it difficult on deadline. As a play-by-play announcer, I absolutely love it when the score changes back and forth. A few days ago, before we recorded this, we had a game where my team, I work for the Albuquerque Isotopes, we scored 2 runs in the seventh inning to take the lead. We gave up the lead in the top of the ninth. We tied the game in the bottom of the ninth. We gave up the lead in the top of the 10th. We tied the game in the bottom of the 10th. We gave up the lead in the top of the 11th. We won the game in the bottom of the 11th. It was the most exhilarating, fun game that we've had the entire season. Those are the moments that I love. I describe it, it's like you feel like you're drunk, but you're sober because the adrenaline is just going so much and you can feel the energy. Every single pitch, this game can potentially end. You feel the energy of the crowd. You feel the tension of the game. And it's my job to add the perfect narration to this, to pause, and let the crowd tell the story and not be talking so much that I overwhelm the audience. Give them little nuggets to set up this moment. And here's the pitch. And maybe it's fouled off. And now you reset the moments again. And then when it does end, then you nail the call. You punctuate the call. You thrive in that moment. And then you shut up. And you let the crowd tell the story. You let the pictures, if it's on TV, tell the story. And you just wait back. And then you add the caption to what people are saying. And to me, like that's what it's all about. I absolutely love those moments.
You're not telling the crowd what they should think. You're letting things linger. It's the classic fly on the wall journalism kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love just noticing different things that are happening on a field that most people may not notice. And again, this is where it comes back to, as a journalist, a lot of times you're just looking what's different, what's going on that's unique. So I love just paying attention. Where is this fielder positioning himself and why? Or what's different compared to usual? So like those little details, I love just keeping my eyes. I'm like a butterfly when I watch the game. My eyes are constantly going everywhere, and then I lock in on the pitch. And so I just think it's so much fun.
Absolutely. And kind of where's your career now? Is this what you're describing? Is it that play-by-play? What else do you do? I kind of feel like, everything's just accumulated for you. You've just got more and more jobs, never any less.
So what I would really like is one job, and that's it. Because sometimes you have all these jobs because you got to pay the bills, because journalism doesn't pay all that well. And minor league baseball does not pay all that well. Sometimes it's survival in order to be able to go on a road trip with your friends and go fly back home to see your family, to go back to San Diego to watch a game at Viejas Arena. You need a little extra money to be able to get on that plane. But the ultimate goal is to do what I'm doing, but to do it in the major leagues. So right now I broadcast AAA baseball. That's the highest level of minor league baseball. The goal is the major leagues. And earlier this year, I got the thrill of being able to fill in. I did 2 games for the Colorado Rockies, July 18th and July 19th, the 2 best professional days of my life. I will tell you, Rami, that was not the dream come true. It was not the dream to fill in for 2 days. The dream is to do that every single day. The dream is to do 162 games year after year after year. And I feel like I'm close, and I choose to believe in myself that it's going to happen, and it's going to happen when the time is right. I hope that time is really soon. But that is the ultimate goal, would be to do play-by-play for a Major League Baseball team. And then when the off season arrives, I don't have to do anything else but rest. You can do the podcast. Someone else can write on Substack. Somebody else can do all these other things. Let other people have a turn on the microphone, and I'll just relax in the off season and get ready for another year.
I'm glad that you seem so determined, and that is very inspiring. Trust. It's exciting to see someone who's had this kind of like light in them for a long time go and grasp on their dreams. That's awesome. I mean, do you feel like what are the next steps for you regarding that?
It's a good question. I don't know. If I knew the answer to that, I'd already be in the major leagues. So it's this constant. So we have this expression at AAA, and a lot of people say it, but I first heard it from one of our pitching coaches. And the expression is be where your feet are. Because when you are a player at AAA, you know that any day, any moment, someone could come up to you and say, you're going to the major leagues. Somebody got hurt. Someone's not performing. Someone needs a few days off because their wife went into labor, and you could be going to the major leagues and your dream is coming true.
Yeah.
That can happen any day, and it's really easy to get caught up into what do I have to do today differently than what I did yesterday and what I've done all season, what I've done my whole life. And sometimes the answer is nothing. Most of the time, in fact, the answer is nothing. There's nothing new that you can do today that you haven't done in the past. Sometimes you just have to wait your turn. And that's really, really challenging to do, to have the patience when something is out of your control. But that's what you have to do as a baseball player. Your goal every day is just to show up and be the best baseball player that you can, help your team win a game, make yourself a better player, and then it's up to somebody else to decide your fate of what happens to you. And so as a broadcaster, I try to take that exact same type of philosophy. my goal tonight, tomorrow, is just to have the best broadcast that I can have, to learn the lessons from previous games and apply those to my broadcast. And then the challenge becomes, well, how do I market myself without being this over the top, annoying person who is, bragging about himself? But how do I get the word out to the right people in the proper way that doesn't look boastful, in order to try to make sure they're aware of who I am and this is what I can do and this is what I've done? And so that becomes the challenge.
Do you think people get bogged down by the what ifs of the world and the kind of what can I be doing better? How can I be stacking my portfolio, when a lot of it in the sports career is kind of what's happening on the outside? What's the external factors?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. But I also think that people do that for a reason. It's because they care, right?
Yeah.
It's like this fine line between obsessing over everything, but also like caring and wanting to get better. I mean, you have to be honest with yourself about, am I really as good as I think I am? You need to go back and read your stories, listen to your stories, analyze everything about it. Like, how can I get better so that I do put myself in a better position? How can I just like package things better? How can I tell these stories better? Or then sometimes it's just, how do I stay consistent? How do I not get complacent? And so all of those things are important. And then you also realize, though, that at a certain point, a job comes open and I don't believe there is such thing as like, oh, this one person is the perfect person for the job. There's
Yeah,
usually
sure.
dozens of people who would be extremely good at the job. And then it just comes down to a vibe check. It really just becomes like, how do you vibe with people, especially something like baseball? We play 150 games in the minor leagues. There's 162 in the majors plus spring training. Someone might be the best voice, the best broadcaster, but if they're annoying, do you want to be around that person 6, 7, 8 months? Or do you just want to be around a person who is extremely good at the job and it's just a fun person to be around? And so that's where I just call it the vibe check. Yeah, you got to be really good, but you got to be a good human. And you got to be at the type that people just want to be around you every day.
Most definitely, and it's no different down here in news journalism or other journalism fields. I'm feeling what you're feeling. It's what team do you want to be a part of? Do you guys have the same kind of goals, the mission statement? What's about you? What do you guys have that you're trying to achieve? As well as, personality. Do you guys mesh well? Is this something where you're going to be lifting each other up? I mean, those are questions when it comes to working with people, and that does produce a better story, a more cohesive kind of environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other career highlights that you'd like to put a spotlight on? Any major moments that kind of led you where you are now?
Well, the one career moment that I'm most proud of has nothing to do with sports, and that's why I'm most proud of it. So I've written 3 books. 2 were about baseball, and one was a true crime. It was called Murder in Pleasanton. It's a true story about a girl who lived down the street from me, who was walking home from school one day in 1984, and she was found stabbed to death on the way home. She lived 5 blocks down the street from me. She went to the same elementary school that I was attending at the time. I went to the same junior high and high school later that she attended. And the case went cold for 27 years. The Pleasanton Police Department could not figure out who did it, could not arrest anyone. And then finally, with DNA technology changing, they got a match and someone was arrested. And it took 3 years for the case to finally go to trial. And that individual was found guilty by a jury of his peers. And I wrote a book about it. It's called Murder in Pleasanton. I had no idea what I was doing, no idea whatsoever, Rami. I'm a baseball guy. I'm a sports guy. I always wanted to do something that was not about sports. I wasn't trying to prove something to anybody else. I was trying to prove to myself that I could do something else. And I asked a lot of dumb questions. I was very naive about how long it would take, but I eventually figured it out. And that's my most proud accomplishment, is writing that book. And I think back to that because I remember thinking so many times, like say when I was a newspaper reporter and the team blows the lead in the 9th inning and you got to go down to the clubhouse and you got to interview the manager and the closer who blew the save or the player who made the error. And you're like, oh man, that's a tough interview, man. That's a quiet clubhouse, right? Like that's tough. That is nothing compared to how hard it is when you interview a woman whose teenage daughter was murdered at age 14. That's a tough interview. And I think back to that book is giving me the ultimate perspective. I'd like to think that I already had the right perspective about sports and what they really mean and what's really important. But that book is something that I can go back on when I talk to the friends of the victim, when I talk to the family members of the guy who was convicted and what it was like for them to share the last name and feel this measure of guilt by association, and having compassion and empathy for not just the victim's family, but also the assailant's family, and having compassion for the police department officers who did their best, and their best just wasn't good enough, maybe because the technology wasn't good enough yet. And so I think about all of those things, and while I'm really glad I did it, I have no desire to ever write another true crime. I had enough bad dreams and started to get paranoid at times. It makes me remember that I like working in baseball and I want to keep working in baseball.
I mean, complete opposite sides of the journalism spectrum, I gotta say.
Yeah.
They couldn't be farther away from each other, and one couldn't be more serious and one couldn't be more fun.
Yeah.
Were you at all a true crime fan before, or was this something that just felt close to you because it happened around you?
I'm not a true crime fan at all. I actually think it's kind of creepy, the way that people are such true crime enthusiasts. I know that it's really popular on podcasts. I know there's a lot of TV shows and books. Part of the challenge for me was actually reading other true crimes to just figure out, like, this is how you write these things.
The structure.
So, yeah, the structure. I read Anne Rule, who rules. May she rest in peace. She's the best.
Awesome.
So I read her books to give me an idea, but I didn't want to read too many because, again, like, I watched a few Dateline NBC specials and I watched Making a Murderer, but it just hasn't ever something that I've cared too much about. But it did speak to me because it was from my hometown, and truth be told, I was about to get laid off my job doing the pregame and the postgame for the Dodgers. I saw the writing on the wall and I was looking for something that I could do while I searched for a new job. And again, in my naiveness, I thought that I could crank out this book in 3 or 4 months. It took me about 3 or 4 years instead.
Did things come naturally to you? It seems like it kind of didn't. And a lot of things were learned along the way of the process.
Yeah, I don't think that it was ever natural for me to do a true crime book. Even just how you approach people, where you approach people, like going through archives, talking to police, trying to find police reports, Freedom of Information Acts. Those are not things that I did as a baseball writer. Those are not things that I do as a play-by-play announcer. And so, I think that it's a combination of being persistent, but also being professional, being respectful of people's times and understanding. I know that I took a lot of care into, when I do interview this person, it's going to be a heavy topic. So I want to make sure that I find the proper environment for us to speak. I wanted to do as many as I possibly could in person. I wanted to be able to look somebody in the eye and have them be able to look me in the eye when I'm asking them about this horrible tragedy that happened. I wanted an environment where it wasn't so loud that they have to scream details, but it wasn't so quiet that everybody in the room could hear the whatever painful memories they have of this terrible thing happening. So it was a lot of coffee shops, but it was also, okay, let's see if we can find a corner of the coffee shop. Let's see if we can find an outdoor spot in the coffee shop. I also wanted to record everything because I didn't want to be furiously taking notes where they're looking at me recording, writing. I wanted to be able to just have the recorder in a place so that I could listen back to it. I like listening back to interviews myself so that I can critique myself. Did I miss a follow-up question that I should have asked? All those different things. And all of that was just something you learn by trial and by error, with when it comes to reporting on a true crime.
Why was it so important to you to keep pushing on with the novel?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I'm stubborn. Once I start something, I don't want to stop. I think that I had enough people tell me that they were glad that this story was being told and that they wanted me to finish it. Um, so there's another background to it, Rami. When look, I did not need the permission of anybody to write the book, right? Legally
Mhm.
speaking.
Okay.
It's a very famous case, a lot of public interest in this. You don't need anybody's permission.
Yeah.
I did not want to write the book unless the victim's family was okay with me writing the book. And I
Respectable.
remember,
Yeah.
yeah. And I remembered even thinking, well, how do I even go about asking their permission or talking to them? Am I just going to call one day out of the blue? Like, I don't live in Pleasanton anymore. Am I just going to show up on the door? So I wrote a handwritten, an old fashioned note. I typed it up actually. I typed up a letter. I put it in the mail and I mailed it to the victim's mom, who still lived at the same house.
Yeah.
And so it goes through the mail. I think it was 3 or 4 days later. I get a phone call. It's from a 925 area code number, and my heart started to beat. I realized immediately this is probably who it is.
Mhm.
And we talked on the phone. And I wanted to let her know who I was. I told her that I wanted to meet her in person. So the next time that I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, I came to her house. I remember thinking, what do I bring? So I brought flowers and I brought a copy of my previous book. And she welcomed me into the house. And I remember it was so eerie, Rami, because I walked in the house and it was the exact same floor plan as my childhood house down the street. We walked in the door, there's a room here. Go down the hallway. Tina's room was here just like my sister's. My room was here just like Drew. Master bedroom back that way. Bathroom in between. Down the hallway, kitchen, living room, backyard, the exact same floor plan. And I
Yeah.
remember it was so eerie to me because it was like this was my house, but this
Mhm.
was their house, and this is where Tina lived. And so the mom couldn't have been nicer, and she gave me her blessing. She helped get me in touch with a number of other different family members and stories that she
Yeah.
had. And so that's when I realized, like, okay, this is my motivation to finish this book.
Was it hard being so connected to the story, being so close, seeing that house and being like, well, this looks just like mine. This looks just like my childhood house.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. There was times that it was hard, but other times like, it was easy because I also like people could tell me things and I was like, no, that's not true. Either you forgot, your memory's off, or you're just repeating something that somebody told you that's not true. It made me easier to sift through the BS actually and be able to
Okay.
just really understand. No, 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 that's not what was happening. Like I lived it. I was there. I remember hearing the cop cars whiz by my house going to Tina's house the day that it happened. I remember talking about it at school with people over and over and over again. I remember when I was in high school and this girl asked me to the Sadie Hawkins dance, and we were underneath this tree, and the tree was planted for Tina to keep Tina's memory alive. So, like, I lived this story, I know this story, and all of those factors led me to believing that I was the right person to tell this story at the right time.
Absolutely. And how did it feel getting that book out? I mean, at the end of the day, you finished it and you kind of say that it's something that you feel most proud of.
Yeah, so when you finish a book, it's extreme pride that you finish it. It's a relief that it's done, but it's also anguish because there's no going back. Like once
Mhm.
it's done, you can't go back and change it anymore. And like the hardest part was actually editing the book. I want to say that the publisher wanted like 70,000 words and I wrote 125,000, and I think we settled somewhere around like 85 to 90,000. And so then you think about like what I deleted and whether or not I deleted something from this chapter and now this chapter doesn't make sense as a result of that, or just does it still flow the whole way? Obviously you're terrified about any mistakes that you made, and sure enough, oh my gosh, the very first sentence,
Oh
there's a
no.
mistake. It's
No.
yeah, it's a little one, but it's significant enough. Um, so I was in the fifth grade when the murder happened, and I started it off in basically in the first person, saying that I was in the fifth grade when this happened, and then I realized I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about Tina's younger brother Drew, who was in the second grade, and so I changed it to Drew, but I didn't change fifth grade to second grade. And so the first sentence says that Drew is in the fifth grade. So it's not the end of the world mistake, but it's a mistake. And it's one of those, oh my gosh, I cannot believe it's right away, there's a mistake. And then you just get terrified, paranoid. How many other mistakes, careless ones like that got made? And, and there was a few things that I wish that I could do differently about the book. That's going to be the case when it's that many words. But overall, I'm proud of what I did.
It's amazing. And I'm glad, and you should feel proud. Was that kind of worry or regret when it comes to the writing? Was that apparent in your other books as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, here's the thing. When you're a newspaper reporter, there's multiple people who are reading your copy before it goes to print. And once it's in print, it's out there, but you can always, like, next day, you can do a correction, you can update, there's different things like that. When you're in a book, it's done. There was one person who edited the book, and lo and behold, it was actually a San Diego State alum. Complete coincidence. Megan Lattisaw, she was great, but she didn't know Pleasanton. She didn't know the story. And so she was wonderful in the edits that she could make, but there's just certain things that she wouldn't know, like whether Drew was in the second grade or the fifth grade. She had to rely on me being accurate about that. And so, yeah, those are the things that, I lost sleep. Constantly lost sleep as I was reporting on it. But in those final days when it's, okay, you need to send the absolute final draft to the publisher, and you're like, wait, what if there's a mistake? Yeah. But I also think is as tough as that is, that also, it shows how much you care, and it shows that you want to get it right.
It's hard to recall a book, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But I think obviously you do care. And do you have any aspirations for anything else like that in the future? Any other books?
No other true crimes. I'm done with true crimes. One and done. Yep.
Done. Throw it out the window. That's okay.
Yeah, mic drop, and it's done. But hopefully there's another book or two in my future. They're exhausting, and so I want to make sure that it's the right time and that I'm in the right headspace and the proper time exists in order to do it. But I hope there's more in the future. Yeah.
Do you see any other kind of journalism adventures for you in the future? You're saying sometimes you like to dip out of sports journalism. Things get a little quieter there. Is there anything else that you'd kind of dip your toes in?
My dream half retirement job is to be some type of journalism broadcasting professor. Maybe it's teaching play-by-play. Maybe it's some type of sports broadcasting or sports journalism class. I don't want to stop what I'm doing. If I could do one class on the side, one per semester, or if I could just do like a small group where it's like a summer session where it's like an intensive course, and you work with, I don't know, 3 to 5 students or something like that. I want to be able to give back the way that people helped me. That would be I don't want to call it retirement job. That's what I say would be my dream half retirement job.
Love it. Dream half retirement job. I hope that pans out. I mean, kind of as things are wrapping up, is there anything you'd like to leave with listeners?
Just care. Just care. Don't be lazy. If there's a fire burning, go to it. Interview people, take pictures, take videos. Don't necessarily always just believe the press release. Don't just write the quote that was in the press release. Pick up the phone, call people over and over. Keep calling people. Don't be lazy. Care. Keep searching for something different in the story that somebody else does not have. And whether that is a murder, whether that is a fire, whether that is a baseball game, whatever that topic is, whether it's a different recipe for how to cook something, just be perpetually curious and want to be the best that you can be.
Is that what motivates you? Something as strong as the care for the thing that you're reporting on?
Yeah. I mean, I want the people around me to know they can trust me, that they can count on me, whether that is the sports editor at the Daily Aztec, whether that's the managing editor at the Daily Aztec, whether that's the engineer back in the Cumulus studios in Albuquerque when I'm doing play-by-play, whether that's my coworkers, whoever it is. I want them to know that they can count on me, and that when it's a really big moment, I'm not going to run from it. I'm going to be there to do that moment, that story, the way that it should be done.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there you have it, folks. Care. See through things 100%. And for the last time, Josh, do you want to send things off?
My name is Josh Suchon. It has been my honor to be the host of the Where You At podcast, and this podcast is now in the very capable hands of Rami Alarian. He, not me, he will talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.